Most people who visit Thailand never leave the tourist infrastructure. They move between airports, hotels, beach clubs, and temple complexes, all of them connected by roads built for exactly this purpose, staffed by people trained to manage exactly this kind of visitor. It is comfortable, it is efficient, and it gives a completely false impression of what Thailand actually is. Because most of Thailand is not like that at all. Most of Thailand is this: forest, mountains, rivers cutting through valleys that have not been developed because nobody has found a reason to develop them yet. Roads that exist because villages need to reach each other, not because tourists need to reach resorts. Landscapes that look the same today as they looked 100 years ago. This episode goes into the countryside of Sakon Nakhon province. The mountains, the forests, the trails, and the villages that sit in the spaces between the places. It is the episode about what this part of Thailand actually looks like when you get away from the city. To the west and south of Sakon Nakhon city, the flat paddy landscape that dominates the province begins to rise. The hills that appear on the horizon as you drive south are the edge of a mountain range running along the provincial border. The range covers several hundred square kilometers of dense tropical forest, sandstone cliff formations, waterfalls, and a protected national park. The forest here is old. The trees have reached the size where the canopy closes 60 meters above the ground. The forest floor beneath is in permanent shade. Walking into it from the road feels like entering a different climate. The temperature drops, the humidity rises, and the sounds of the outside world disappear within a few hundred meters. The national park was established partly to protect the watershed that feeds the rivers and ultimately the lake. The forest holds rainwater, releases it slowly into the streams and rivers that flow north and east toward Nonghan. It regulates the water supply for the agricultural land below. This is not a managed tourist park with facilities. It is a protected area where the primary purpose is conservation rather than entertainment. The result is a landscape that feels genuinely wild in a way that is becoming increasingly rare in Southeast Asia. There are trails and rangers. But once inside the forest, the infrastructure of management becomes invisible very quickly. The trees are not labeled. The paths are not paved. The animals are not performing. On a weekday in the cool season, it is entirely possible to walk for hours in this forest without seeing another person. The mountain range contains several waterfalls, most of them accessible via trails from the main road that crosses the range. These trails connect Sakon Nakhon and the province to the south. The falls themselves vary considerably in scale depending on the season. In the wet season, June through October, they are powerful and dramatic, fed by the heavy monsoon rain that falls across the range. The water is brown with dissolved soil, and the sound carries a long way through the forest. In the dry season, the same falls become quieter and cleaner, the water running clear over the sandstone formations. The cool season, November through February, is the best time to visit. The falls are still running from the tail end of the wet season. The water is beginning to clear, and the temperature in the forest is genuinely comfortable rather than oppressively humid. The light that filters through the canopy has a quality that flat season light simply does not produce. The trails to the falls are not difficult by any objective measure. They are rough, with uneven ground and tree roots across the path. The occasional stream crossing requires judgment. Decent footwear and moving slowly are the main requirements. What makes the falls worth the walk is the forest through which the trail passes. The walk is 2 hours of being inside something extraordinary, with a waterfall at the end as the reward for having done it. At the base, the water is cold enough to be genuinely refreshing. The pool at the base is clear, and the sandstone rocks around it have been smoothed by water over many years. There are no food vendors here, no rental equipment, no entrance fee beyond the national park gate. Just the water and the forest and the specific silence of a place that has not been organized for visitors. Between the forest and the city, and within the forest in the valleys between the ridges, there are villages. not tourist villages. Not villages that have organized themselves around the expectation of visitors. Villages where people grow rice, raise animals, maintain temples, and live in a way that is changed incrementally rather than dramatically. The architecture of a village in this part of Thailand is immediately distinctive. Traditional wooden houses built on stilts. The elevated floor is a practical response to flooding, providing a functional space underneath for storage, shade, and livestock. The wood used is typically local hardwood from the forest, aged to a deep warm brown that no manufactured material replicates. The roof lines are steep, designed to shed the heavy monsoon rain quickly. Spirit houses, small ornate structures placed at the edge of the property, stand at the entrance to almost every compound. The temple is always the most substantial building. It is maintained with a seriousness that tells you something about the community's priorities. The monks who live in these village temples are often young men from the village itself. Ordination is a traditional rite of passage, a way of making merit for the family and completing an education in Buddhist ethics. Driving through Sakon Nakhon in the cool season, the rhythm of the landscape is rice paddy and village, forest and mountain, river and settlement. Repeated across a distance, it makes clear how much of this province is agricultural rather than urban. The city feels like an interruption in this landscape rather than its center. The villages are not places to visit like temples and waterfalls. They are places to drive through slowly, to stop at a roadside stall for something to eat, to watch the ordinary business of rural Thai life proceeding at its own pace. That indifference is one of the most interesting things about traveling here. If this series makes Thailand feel real to you, subscribe. Every week goes somewhere most travel channels never go. The countryside of Sakon Nakhon is more than anything else a rice landscape. Glutinous rice, the sticky rice that is the staple food of the Northeast, is grown across the flat agricultural land surrounding the city. The rice fills the valleys between the hills. In the wet season, the paddies are flooded and turn the landscape a vivid green. This scenery is extraordinary in the afternoon light. In the harvest season, October and November, the rice turns gold and the paddies take on a warm, dense color. It makes the whole countryside look like it has been lit from inside. Rice cultivation in this region is still largely small-scale and family-based. The mechanization that transformed central Thailand has arrived here slowly. It is still common to see manual harvesting in the smaller paddies. The cut stalks are bundled by hand and laid out to dry in the field. The farmers who work these paddies are the same families who eat at the morning market and worship at the local temples. They fish the lake and have been living in this landscape for generations. The water management of a rice paddy is a sophisticated piece of engineering that is easy to overlook because it looks natural. The bunds, the low earthen walls that divide the paddies and hold the water, are built and maintained by hand. Channels bring water from the rivers to the fields and drain them according to a communal system of water rights. This system predates any formal legal framework. It works because the people depend on it and maintain it together. The best time to see the paddies is either in the bright green of the growing season or in the gold of the harvest. Both are extraordinary. The flat landscape of the Northeast reveals its complexity and beauty when seen at the right light and time of year. And nowhere is it more evident than here in October, when the rice harvest and the Oak Fansa Festival unfold at the same time. The landscape and the culture seem to be doing the same thing at the same time. One of the less-known features of the mountain range west of the city is the sandstone. The range sits on a foundation of sandstone that has been shaped by millions of years of erosion into unique formations. The stone is a deep reddish-orange color, warm and almost luminous in the afternoon light. It has been carved by water and wind into cliff faces, overhangs, caves, and freestanding pillars. These pillars appear without warning at bends in the forest trail. These formations have been used by the communities of the region for a very long time. Several caves contain evidence of prehistoric occupation, paintings and engravings that date back thousands of years. This rock art exists from a time long before the temples, the rice paddies, or the city. The art is not well publicized, and its existence is a reminder that this landscape has been supporting human life for a very long time. More recently, forest monasteries have been established in the hills and valleys around these formations. The connection between dramatic natural landscapes and places of Buddhist practice is not accidental. The qualities that make a sandstone cliff suitable for meditation, remoteness, silence, are what made them attractive to the monks. The sandstone formations are accessible from several points along the road that crosses the range. No entrance fee, no signage, no organized infrastructure. They are simply there in the forest. They require only the willingness to get off the road and walk into the trees to find them. Away from the mountains and the forest, the countryside of Sakon Nakhon has another distinction that is worth going specifically to find. The province is one of the centers of Thai silk weaving, and the villages producing these textiles are scattered across the agricultural land. The silk made here is not the smooth, uniform product sold in Bangkok gift shops. It is hand-woven on traditional wooden looms. Women who learn from their mothers use a process called mudmay, a method of tie-dyeing individual threads before weaving to create unique patterns. The patterns are not decorative in the casual sense. They are a visual language that has been developed over generations. The specific geometric designs carry meaning understood within the community, even if it is invisible to an outside observer. The color combinations, repeat patterns, and border designs, all of these have significance that connects the textile to the place and the people. The weaving is done at home. In the cool months, the sound of wooden looms operating comes from inside houses throughout the weaving villages. Finished cloth is sold through direct sale, local markets, and online platforms that give these weavers access to buyers they would never have reached. Visiting the weaving villages is free of the transactional atmosphere of a tourist craft market. Nobody is trying to sell anything aggressively. The looms are operating because cloth needs to be made. It is not a demonstration. It is a working day. The silk from these villages is by any objective measure exceptional. Buying directly from the weaver is a straightforward way a visitor can contribute directly to a household in this province. Back to a road through the countryside. Wide, empty, with the forest on one side and paddy fields on the other. This section is practical and should feel energetic. The countryside of Sakon Nakhon is most accessible on a hired motorcycle, which can be arranged through guest houses in the city. For between 200 and 300 baht per day, the road south out of the city toward the mountain range is good tarmac and straightforward to navigate. The national park entrance is approximately 40 minutes from the city center. The waterfalls are a further 20 to 40 minutes inside the park, depending on which trail is taken. The sandstone formations are accessible from turnoffs along the main road through the range. Most of them unmarked but findable with a basic map or by asking at the park entrance. The silk weaving villages are accessible on the roads east and southeast of the city. The village of that Phantom district and the communities around it are the most concentrated area of weaving activity, though the craft is practiced across a much wider area. Asking at the city's community tourism office will produce specific directions and introductions. For the rice paddies, the approach is simpler. Get on a motorcycle, leave the city in any direction, except north toward the lake, and drive slowly. The landscape of Sakon Nakhon province rewards unhurried movement. The things worth seeing are not announced by signs or organized by infrastructure. They are simply present in the landscape, available to anyone willing to move slowly enough to notice them. The cool season, November through February, is the best time for all of this. The forest is at its most comfortable, the waterfalls are running, and the rice harvest is either underway or recently finished. And the flat agricultural light of the northeast in these months has a quality that the rest of the year does not produce. Bring water. Bring cash in small denominations. Bring the kind of patience that rural Thailand requires and generously rewards. 5 episodes into this series, the picture of this province is becoming complete. A city built around a sacred lake. Temples that have been in continuous use for 5 centuries. Food that developed in response to real conditions and ended up being extraordinary. A lake that turns red in December. A forest that has been protecting the watershed for the communities below it for as long as those communities have existed. Villages where silk is still woven on wooden looms in the same patterns that have been woven for generations. None of it is famous. None of it is on the standard Thailand itinerary. All of it is real, accessible, and free to experience. The final episode of this series brings everything together into a practical guide. Exactly how to visit this amazing place, how long to spend, what to budget, how to get there, and what to do on each day. It is the episode that takes everything covered in the previous 5 and turns it into something actionable. That episode is next week. This is Travel Savvy Thailand. Have you ever rented a motorcycle and just driven into the Thai countryside without a plan? Or is that the kind of travel that sounds either brilliant or completely terrifying? Drop it in the comments. Everyone gets a reply.